guys, it's Dennis here. Just want to run you through how we maintain our 76 series Landcruiser. It's 2015 model, which is before the DPFs came out in these. They're very basic to service and very easy to do for anyone, and it's sort of one of the key reasons we chose to use a vehicle like this. Very familiar with them. We see them a lot of mine sites and different sorts of work that I do. And yeah, so basically, first thing I do once the car is off, I make sure I've let the car run for a little while to warm it up. This lets the oil drain out a lot easier. It's just recommended you do it. It stirs up any leftover junk that's up in the bottom and makes it easier to drain. First thing I do is I take off the oil cap. That'll just allow the oil to run out of the pan underneath easily. And this is fitted with an oil catch can. It is recommended you do check these regularly, because if this does fill up, it'll actually act like a blockage and cause a positive crank pressure. If you are going to run a catch can, I would recommend just checking it whenever you remember to do it, every couple of thousand Ks. And the frequency that we do our services every 5,000 Ks as well. It also, I find that it is generally not full before then, unless we have been doing a lot of hard kilometres. So just keep that in mind if you are going to run a catch can. Pop the cap off that one as well, and I generally just pull the filter out, check the condition of it, make sure it's not fully gummed up or bunged, and just let it sit there and drain. The air filter is found in this housing here. This is an easy one to do as well. Planning on running an oil filter, it is, I also recommend, if you're going to spend a lot of time on dirt roads, that you check and maintain these regularly. This one's been pretty good. I've only been doing highway kilometres, but as you can see, you still do pick up a lot of dirt and bugs and all the rest of it. That's why these need to be cleaned out a lot more frequently, but they do offer a lot better filtration in my opinion. They seal up around the box as well, which is a common problem with Toyotas, of the box not sealing up and stopping dust ingress. So I've had no issues with the unifilters so far. We've been running these for 220,000 kilometres. The other thing I do is I just have a quick look at the coolant levels, the colour of it, and the conditions. So the power steering fluid located down here, I just pull this up, have a look at the oil, make sure it's a good colour, clean, and the level's located on the side. This is just showing just slightly lower than full, but as it warms up, oil expands, that'll be on its full indicator. Also, just check your brake fluid, just make sure it's a good level. This was just changed 10,000 Ks ago, so everything's fine there. And same with the clutch. Those are the two differences of those two. The washer fluid for your windscreen is here. Now, this is fitted with a secondary fuel filter as well, which is located here. It does have a fuel bowl on the bottom of it, or a water trap. It is hard to see from here, but it is always good to monitor all these levels as you're driving around and traveling around. I generally do this with a bit of a pre-start check. With work, we have to pre-start our vehicles every day before we use them. I take this habit out of work as well, so I generally do have a good look over the vehicle, or a bit of a walk around and visual, just to see if there are any noticeable dramas. Other thing that I always check is your battery clamps. Just give them a good feel to make sure they're tight. I've seen them come loose in vehicles before and do all sorts of horrible things, like, and they do explode if they come loose and bounce around and something rubs against them. So yeah, definitely worth checking. What you're going to need is just some rag to clean up any mess that you make, clean out the housings and all that sort of stuff. The unifilter foam set, I'm replacing it this time, as it was starting to look a bit worn out the last time I did it. I normally just pull it out, clean it out and put new oil on it and refit it. This one comes pre-oiled. You'll need a 40mm ring spanner to undo the sump plug at the bottom of the motor, the filter housing socket. These you can buy pretty cheap on eBay, easy to do. I'm just using a breaker bar to undo it. Doesn't need to be super tight or anything like that when you do it back up. This is just easy. I find it's just easier to get around the steering connections under the engine. You'll need a funnel to pour the oil into the motor. I use the genuine Toyota oil filters. It's cheaper if you buy these in a pack of say 6 or 8 online. That way, if you plan on doing all your own servicing, you can have bulks. Use the Penrite HBR 1040 oil by Penrite. I've been putting it in the car since it was to 40,000 kilometres. It's good oil, never had any issues with it. The capacity of the VDJ motors is 9.5 litres. It's also very easy. You just drain half a litre out of this big tank and you just pour the whole lot into the motor if you're doing a complete oil change. If you're not taking out the filter, couldn't tell you, to be honest. I've always replace the filter every 5,000 k's. And a catch pan. This one's a 15 litre capacity, 9.5 litres. It gives you plenty of wiggle room if you're going to make a bit of a mess. And the grease gun. The grease gun, you'll need this to check all your ball joints, drag links, the shocks and the suspension components and universal joints. I'll just give it a quick grease every 5 or 10,000 k's. Don't overdo it. If you've got grease flying out of everything, it's too much. This is just the catch can oil, so as you can see, it doesn't come flying out in a hurry. I'll just let that drain over the duration of the service. So let the car warm up a bit. This is nice and warm. Oil should be nice and should run out quite nicely. This washer underneath the bung, I do like to change it every couple of services, just a peace of mind thing so it doesn't ever leak. Never had it leak. But I just like to make sure everything's clean here before I start. You know, I don't like to accidentally contaminate anything inside the motor. 40mm ring spanner. Nice and loose. I also think 9 times out of 10 you're going to get something on yourself, so just be mindful of that. While the oil's coming out, it's always good just to have a bit of a look at it, see if you can see anything suspicious in it. It's black, just like every other diesel's oil, so that's good, I suppose. No foreign colours or liquids or water or anything like that. Doesn't look like there's any contamination at all. Now that that's nearly drained, look at doing the filter housing. While that oil's been running out, I've just been having a bit of a look underneath the car if there's anything suspicious. Everything looks good. Sensors are tight, just as much as it ever is. There's no excess grease or mess just flowing around under the car. There's no suspicious oil leaks running down the side of the engine or down the side of any parts under the car. I like to check around the transfer case and the gearbox, any of your joins, your plugs in the side of them, any of your flanges, just anywhere. Just have a good look around and see if there's any suspicious oil coming around. This shouldn't be super tight. You only ever do them up, nip them up. But I just find it's easy to use a breaker bar to get past this whole arm here. I do generally just leave the socket on it for now. Just go nice and easy, and once that O-ring's passed, it'll start running out. Fills out, drain any excess oil. That's that. So with these filters, I generally like to pull them right apart, have a bit of a look. That's fine. And then these two, if this ever ends up in the car, if this comes out when you pull the filter off, you have to make sure this stays in the housing. If you don't, this will eventually collapse and it'll starve your engine from oil. So what I like to do is I just like to, it's on a spring, you push it out, pull it to one side, that'll all pull apart. Set that aside. I generally just like to give this a bit of a wipe out and a clean, just to make sure there's no foreign bodies or build up in the bottom of it. Just give it a nice wipe out. I'll keep cleaning till that's tidy, but it doesn't look like there's any foreign bodies or anything built up underneath the filter. It's nice and tidy. The filter's doing its job. Once you're happy that this is all clean enough, the spring sits over a bit of a spigot in the middle. Sits that over the spring, push it into one side. There you go, it's back in. That is probably one of the most important parts about servicing your Toyota, is making sure that this part is inside the filter housing. Now that you have your new filter, you come with two sets, so I assume it's because they use it in another vehicle as well. Nice new clean filter. I like to actually put a little bit of oil on the ends of these. I know it's not as necessary with this style of filter, but I've grown in the habit of putting oil on these things from servicing other cars, and with your other types of filters. I generally just tip that to the side a bit. Find there's a bit of oil in there. Just run a bit over the outsides. It's just a habit. As like I said, it's probably not as necessary. That springs over that. The old O-ring is quite easy to pull out. And you only need the large O-ring for this. I like to make sure it's got a bit of oil on it as well. As I was told during my apprenticeship, there's always time for lube. Throw that over. Make sure it goes back into the correct groove. Once you're happy with all of that, clean up where you're going to be touching and go and put it back in. Now that this is all drained, I like to get a nice clean bit of rag and just soak up any excess old oil in there. Just make sure it's nice and clean before you put it back in. So I think it's just good to check for any damage or burrs to the face that the O-ring actually pulls up against. Everything's spotless in there. The end of your filter goes over the spigot inside the housing. That's pulled up. Just finger tight. And I just like to just give that a nice little pull. Nothing extreme. You don't want to put that on so tight it's impossible to get off the next time. That washer is starting to look a bit worn out. I'll definitely make sure I change that one in the next service. Plug's nice and clean before you go back in as well. Same thing, you want it tight, but you don't want it so tight that you can't get it off next time. Give everything a wipe down and a clean. You don't want any excess oil just floating around under your motor to confuse you next time. And we're done. So with that, I've just separated and put half a litre into an old 1 litre container that I've got. That way I know it's getting the right amount of oil into the engine. I find it's easy to hold the drum upside down when doing this. Then once I'm done using the oil drum, I just refill it with the old oil. That's why these oil pans are quite good. I find the smaller ones are a bit harder to work with, but this larger pan is actually quite easy to get rid of the excess oil. Now if you're doing this on the road, most waste facilities will actually let you take your old oil to them and it goes down as recycling, so it doesn't cost you anything to dump it. And also if you don't want to spend a lot of money buying a proper oil pan, you can find, you'll go to Mitre 10 or Kmart and you'll find like a 15 litre container for $4 or something like that. Seems a little bit wasteful, but if you can't carry those sorts of things on the road, it's the easiest way to do it. So now that's all drained, push the filter back into its housing. That's all done back up. I like to check the inside of the cap as well, just to see if there's any dry build-up. That's a pretty good telltale if there's something wrong with your motor. If you're ever looking at a new car or something like that, that is something to check. If you've got a catch can fitted, just make sure that's done draining. This one's still got a little bit to go, but when that's done, we'll just close that off before we take it for a drive. Last but not least, I like to just give this a bit of a wipe down. Keep it nice and clean. I worked for a mechanic when I was a lot younger, and he was a very clean mechanic. He didn't like to have excess oil spilt anywhere, or unlike me, I'm just dropping a bit of stuff there, but everything that he put back in was always fairly well spotless, re-oiled and cleaned up, whatever was necessary. And that's the dirty side of the filter. Nice and tidy. These come out just like so. Because these ones were starting to get a bit ratty and a bit dry. Can't really show you because they're dirty, but the filter was starting to tear under some of the rubbish. That's just an early sign that it's wearing out while we're replacing it today. Once again, just cleanliness. wipe out any excess stuff. You don't want any random floaties from your intake. Just pays to be clean. Just sit that there. So this one is the pre-oiled filter, but I thought, well, while we're here, I may as well just give you a bit of a demonstration of what you do when setting up your filters. Now, I think Unifilter recommend that you do this in a container. Basically what they tell you is you can't put too much oil on it by wringing it dry. So you just put once you can in there, wring it out, and it will spread through it. And like I said, you can't put too much oil in it because you just keep going until you get an excess out of it. I do tend to try and not leave an excess amount of oil in it. Because it can build up on some sensors, so it pays to just try not to overdo it if you can. Same with this one, it's just how I do it. You'd be surprised how well that rings through it. Just if you are driving dusty roads all the time, these do pick up a lot more dust, and you will have to clean them out more frequently. If you are going to do some corrugations, I do recommend using a snorkel sock. Also made by Unifilter, pretty cheap thing to buy, and it keeps you from having to clean this out every day. Instead you just clean out the sock. When refitting this, I find it's easy to lay it out on top of each other as evenly as you can. Just stuff it in under the corners. It's quite easy to do. Can't really get it wrong. Just make sure you put the filter in the right side of the housing. Push that up under there. Make sure it's nice and smooth underneath. There's no big lumps or anything like that. Bit of a wriggle, nothing comes loose or pops out. On the back side, it looks like it's got the green all the way to the edge, so it's nice and clean. Your green one is your second filter, your yellow is your first filter. So that will pick up all the shit first, all the rubbish first, and the second one is your second stage cleaning. Foam to the top, make sure these are the right way around. If you try to force it in the other way, it won't really close the lid, but you never know, might be able to force it on there or something silly. But yep, yellow side down, foam to the top. I generally have a bit of a look in here too, so you can see on the bottom side it's quite dirty, top side spotless. For the top side, I just like to give it a bit of a wipe out just to make sure there's no sort of dry build up or anything in there. But as you can see, that is pretty well, that is spotless in there. Make sure there's no water or anything sitting in the bottom of it if you've sealed your airbox like I have to suit the snorkel. That way, by everything being clean now, you can see for the next time how much build up you've gotten since the last time you serviced it. Once you're happy with the cleanliness of it all, it just sits in your box. Make sure it's sitting nice and neatly. That'll just sit over it nicely. Flip it back up. 4 clips on these box. It's pretty pretty hard to mess it up. Now that you've changed the oil, you're happy that all the housings and everything are nice and closed. It's out of gear. Start it up. Let it run for 30 seconds and this will just get the oil flowing through all the new filter and everything. With some of your older cars, you wait until the check engine light turns off, but it turned off almost straight away. Now the car's run for 30 seconds or so, you just turn it off and let it sit for about 30 seconds and just check your oil level. Always have to wipe it first go. Now that's serviced, it should be showing pretty well perfect on full, which it is. Not sure if you can quite see that, but you can see that there's a bit of an air gap between that top bit there and it's perfectly on the full mark. Now that we've done an oil change, which is really good. That's pretty well the gist of all that done. All we've got to do is just dive underneath it and hit all the linkages and stuff with the grease gun. So your front drive shaft has 3 grease nipple locations. You've got one in the center of the rear uni joint, one in the center of the front uni joint up inside, tucked up in there, and then you've got the one for your spine here. You have to be mindful with these ones here, you don't want to overfill that because it'll fill up the housing with grease and won't let it compress when it needs to. And then with the rear as well, you've got the same setup. You've got one in the center of each universal joint, one for the spine. And then for the rear, you'll have any of your leaf spring hangers as well. You've got one for the front hangers and then you'll have 2 at your shackles at the back. While you're under here as well, it always just pays to have a bit of a look around. I also like to check the U-bolts on the differentials every now and then where they bolt to the leaf hangers. Like to check that these are tight. Last thing you want is some of them coming loose on the road. Otherwise, that's about everything that I sort of look over. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your views. For the next one.